right, welcome everyone. We are joined by Debi Bryk, Dr. Chad Yarbrough, and Dr. Don Thompson. They'll start by walking through some of the most common questions our team receives about the MaxGen Labs genetic report, and then we'll open it up for a live Q&A with the audience. Feel free to drop your questions into the Q&A chat box anytime, and with that, I'll let you guys take the floor.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Hello.
Morning.
Okay, so the first question, for someone opening their MaxGen Labs genetic report for the first time, what are the most important sections to focus on right away? So the most important sections to focus on right away would be exactly the order that the test is designed in. So the foundational section. The foundational section is going to address sleep, diet, toxins, and gut health, which we want to always work on those areas first before we move on to the next section.
And inflammation and fatty acids.
Yeah, if you're not sleeping, you're not healing.
Yep.
So you got to get your sleep down, but inflammation is huge. And sometimes inflammation can affect your sleep. So, yeah, I would say that the test is designed perfectly in order of importance, because when we get to the hormonal sections at the end and the neurological, when you think of when you have to treat people in an ordered fashion, and so we look at it as like a pyramid, and you can't put the capstone on the pyramid without building the base of the pyramid. So we look at neurotransmitters and hormones are at the top. So if you're not sleeping and you've got a bunch of inflammation, you got to hit the groundwork. So perfect design, and but inflammation is one of my biggest thing I like to look at.
Yeah, definitely. And if our gut's unhealthy and our diet is not good, that's going to cause inflammation alone. So you can't out supplement a bad diet. So you don't want to jump ahead and say, "Oh, I have MTHFR," and just throw a bunch of supplements at yourself if if your gut's not healthy and your diet's not healthy and you're not sleeping, then those things may even backfire on you. They're not going to help until we address those issues first.
Yeah. We get a lot of questions too about the smoking section. And of course, we don't know if you're a smoker or have smoked or what the deal is. So this gets to everybody. This is on everybody's report. And it's just there in case you are smoking. Smoking, and I'm not like necessarily a fan or negative towards nicotine, as Debbie knows. It's the smoking, and the smoking actually messes up a lot of pathways further in the report, our liver pathways or detox pathways. So it's there in case you are a smoker, and if you want to stop smoking, we test some genes that might give you some ideas of how to stop smoking. So that's just there in case you are a smoker. It's on everyone's report, even if it's a child. So, there's just no way to remove it.
But don't start smoking.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't
Yeah.
stop smoking.
Okay, how should someone use their genetic insights alongside lifestyle factors like nutrition, fitness, and sleep rather than viewing genes as a fixed outcome? Yeah, I mean, this is a great question.
Yeah.
Genetics can increase our risk, but it's diet and lifestyle and environment toxins that essentially dirty up or turn our genes on and give us the problems. So the reason why you'd want to work on lifestyle and diet and exercise and all that is because by cleaning up those areas in your life, you can essentially improve the expression of your genes so that they don't give you problems. And the other thing too is you don't want to look at one gene and run with it, because many times, depending on the gene, sometimes you need several variants in a pathway before it's really an issue. Sometimes when there's just one variant, it has a very small effect on the body. But the largest effect on our body is what we're putting in our mouth, our chronic stress or lack of sleep. Those are the things that we need to address, and why that's so important, and not get, fixed on like, oh, I have this one gene, I have to do all these things. Just because you have it doesn't mean that it's expressing or giving you problems.
I literally just got off the phone with a person doing this report, and they had not been under a lot of stress. That's neurotransmitter section. Had also been under a lot of poor habits over the past year, and go to the doctor. Hormone levels are way off. We got to give you hormones. And didn't want to do it. Said, no, I'm going to clean up my diet. Just cleaned up the diet. And bam. Hormones are great. What'd you do? What have you been taking? I'm like, nothing. Just changed my food. So like that food is so important. And you, like you said, you can't out supplement a poor diet. And diet gets rough though. And if it gets very difficult, food is hard. Food medicine is difficult. And I didn't know it was going to be this hard when I got into it. And now it's like 17 years now, Chad, something like that. Like, and it doesn't get easier. Like food is very complicated. But my favorite genes to look at are actually related to the gut. Because if you've got your FUT2 and your MyoD9Bs and they're active, you're going to increase inflammation throughout your whole body. So, but your food is going to be primary for that too. So, yeah, lifestyle is definitely important.
Yeah, that your story is a perfect example of why the test is laid out in the way it is, because hormones are on the test as well, further down. And many times when you make the changes in the foundational section and then start working on the core section, the oxidative stress and the potential nutrient deficiencies next, everything else, it's like a domino effect, and everything else starts to balance out. People already start feeling better. It's amazing.
I think this is a good time to say that most of the variants that we're looking at are not these crazy genetic mutations. I like to call these variants and things that we're looking at as disadvantages. They're just mean that these pathways can only do so much. And some people's pathways can handle a lot of stress, can handle a lot of different toxins, or handle a lot of different, inflammation or things like that. Some people can't. And this is what we're looking at. We're looking at the disadvantages in these different pathways and how to support them. So a lot of these dietary recommendations and things that we recommend are just to lower the demand on the pathway. The pathway can't handle all of this. So it's just a disadvantage. And I just wanted to bring that up because a lot of people will, they think that these things are just, horrible, awful things. And they're really not. They're just subtle disadvantages that we're trying to optimize the diet, optimize, the lifestyle to lower the burden, essentially, for these disadvantages.
Those subtle disadvantages will compound over time too. So the
Absolutely.
longer someone goes with these subtle disadvantages, it's kind of, that maybe you've heard it. Like, would you rather have $1 a day or have a penny and double it every day? Have you ever heard that analogy? Anyway,
Yeah.
your brain obviously goes to like, oh, I'll take $1 a day. But if you take a penny and you double it, and over time, you're actually richer than you were with the dollar. So like it's the little things over time, and time is the enemy. And we have to try to use time to our advantage too.
Yeah. And food is addictive, especially with people with some of these DRD2 genes. They're emotional people are emotional eaters. Sugar isn't there a study that says sugar is more addictive than like cocaine?
Cocaine, yeah, there's actually a whole, yeah,
It hits it hits similar
it
receptors.
lights
Yeah.
up the brain. Yeah,
Right.
lights up the brain just like cocaine.
Right.
And it's in everything.
Breaking these patterns is tough. It's not easy, like Donnie was saying. It's not. But I think in America, we've gotten so far away from eating real food that we're just addicted to this stuff.
The report references concepts like methylation. Can you explain in simple terms what methylation is and which key genes are most associated with it?
That's a deep question, isn't it?
It is. I think it's probably easier to say the function of methylation rather than what it is, because like I could explain what it is, but it's not probably not going to make much sense. But unless Donnie, you have or Brad,
I mean, I try to explain it like it's the gears turning in the cells.
Yeah.
And you've got cogs and gears, and when you've got these, this is the simple, like, because it's much deeper than this, and I know that, but when I'm trying to make it simple, it's the cogs and the gears, and you've got, when you have these methylation defects, you're missing cogs in the gears, and the gears are slipping, and the pathway's not working like it's supposed to.
no, I like that a lot. Yeah, and the function of it is methylation helps regulate DNA repair, replication, and transcription. It helps with genetic stability, genome stability, detoxification from toxins. It also helps produce our neurotransmitters for our mood, like serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine, epinephrine. And it also helps with homocysteine clearance. It converts homocysteine to methionine. So, essentially, it's so important because if we're not methylating, we can be toxic, we can have mood issues, and it can essentially turn on other genes. So, it's very important that we're methylating
Yeah,
properly.
it's a very important pathway. And I mean, I've seen friends of mine that, we just put them on a methylated product and they're calling me the same day, how fast can this work? And it's like, same day, how are you feeling? It's like, I have more control of my emotions. I can sit here and focus. It's like, the people are like, it's changed my life. And we can't just start throwing methylated supplements at everybody. We have to go in order of the test. This is very important not to skip ahead to this page. Yeah, it can make a big change in people's lives and how they feel, their emotions, depression, anxiety, great results with it. But definitely don't skip ahead to this page.
Yeah, and as far as the genes that are associated with it, you can see this is just the folate page on the screen, but it shows you all the genes for just folate. So the genes needed for methylation would be all the folate genes, B12 genes, there's several of those too, a whole page of those, B6, phosphatidylcholine is part of the methylation pathway, very important, which is the PEMT gene. Also, BHMT and MTHFD1 that have to do with folate metabolism also can increase the need for choline. Glutathione's important for methylation, as well as CBS, that gene can cause high homocysteine, high ammonia. So that plays a role as well. I could list all the genes if you want me to, but they're on the test. But they're all important because, like, MTHFR is, the one that converts folate from food into a usable form of methylfolate. MTHFD1 does the same thing. And then FOLH1 has to do with intestinal absorption of B12. FOLR1 has to do with cerebral folate levels. SLC19A1 has to do with getting folate into the cell. So there's so many genes involved in even just folate metabolism over MTHFR. So I've had, many clients that, well, not many, it's most people, the majority do have at least one variant in MTHFR. But even the ones that don't, they'll have many times variants in other other folate metabolizing genes. And so they're having issues with methylation, even though they don't have MTHFR. And that's why, just testing MTHFR doesn't give you the whole picture, because you also need to know not only those other genes, but the B12 genes, B6, and all the other ones I mentioned, phosphatidylcholine and CBS and glutathione. The report uses terms like wild type, heterozygous, and homozygous. What do these mean in simple terms, and how should someone interpret them when reviewing their results?
We had to touch on this earlier to make it clear, right?
Yeah.
And Debbie's got a good explanation.
Okay, so wild type generally refers to the most common or naturally occurring form of a gene or characteristic in a population. It doesn't necessarily mean that there are no issues or problems associated with it. And this is why we have our test is in 3 shades of blue instead of like red, yellow, and green, because some wild type variants are not ideal. For example, GSTM1, which is a glutathione gene. Most people have this, so it's most common in our population, and it increases the risk for toxic exposure. So if you are just looking for the homozygous, you might miss it. But this is also why the test, in the descriptive pages before you get to the SNP summary, will calculate your, result and your risk, because it'll take that all into account. So if you want to know for each specific gene, you can look at your SNP summary, just like the COMT and the MAO genes. Heterozygous, which would mean 1 copy. So homozygous means 2 copies, one from mom and one from dad. It just means 2 of the same. Wild type is actually a homozygous wild type, but homozygous is 1 from each parent. And then heterozygous would be 1 variant from 1 parent. We don't know which one. But like in the COMT and the MAO genes, which have to do with neurotransmitters, heterozygous is actually more balanced, because fast means you could have a deficiency in those neurotransmitters, serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine. And for the MAO, it's wild type. For the COMT, I believe it's homozygous makes it fast. I think I got that right.
Slow.
And then, so then if it's slow, that means you can have a buildup of neurotransmitters. So fast, you burn up your neurotransmitters quickly. Slow, you can have a buildup of neurotransmitters in the brain. So heterozygous is actually a little more balanced. So that's why it's important to, to understand the difference. Because I've had people say, well, it's homozygous, it's got to be bad. Not necessarily. For the most part, it usually is, but you'd need to read your SNP summary to see your result.
Yeah. If you're joining us and you used another lab, some of the other labs out there, they will use, so homozygous just means the same on both allele. When we say homozygous, when most people in our industry says homozygous, they mean homozygous the variant. There's a couple other labs that report homozygous wild. So I just want to clear that up. If you used another lab, homozygous wild just means it's wild type from both parents. So it can be used interchangeably. So our homozygous, when you see it with us, it's a homozygous variant. I see that question asked all the time in Facebook groups and things where they're confused. What says homozygous? Yeah, but it's homozygous wild. It's the wild.
Is it safe or reliable to use ChatGTP to interpret genetic results?
Oh.
Chad, you want to take this one?
So, yeah, I have dove deep into the AI world. We are staying on top of every advancement in AI to the week, almost to the day. We have a $20,000 AI server here on site that is air-gapped. It's not transmitting data. We're still playing with it to see what it's capable of doing. We may implement some down the road. But right now, we're fielding this stuff every day. Somebody will say, oh, you're conflicting with my 23andMe data. This is not correct. And we'll get an email that is extremely well written and technical in saying we conflicted 9 times with 23andMe. And when I pull the data up and I'm looking at it, I'm thinking, this is the exact same. This is what's going on here. And I mean, this happens weekly. And what happens is right now with AI, not to get too far into this, is AI has a context window. And I don't really probably shouldn't get into this, but it can only handle so much data at a time before it starts doing what's called a hallucination. So it hallucinates and starts filling in the gaps and making stuff up. So you can expect to have about a 30% error rate by using ChatGPT or some of the other Claude. I hate to knock Claude. I love Claude. Gemini, all these different apps. So people are actually uploading their PDFs, uploading the raw data files from 23andMe, putting all this stuff, everything. It's not capable of reading it all and keeping it all in its brain at the exact same time. And it fills in the gaps where it can't do that. And that's where the errors come up. So you can upload our report to ChatGPT, and our report will clear as day say you are very slow COMT, but it'll interpret it as very fast because it forgot when it read it. It's just making stuff up. So I highly, highly recommend people not use ChatGPT currently. And this is February of 2026. Now 2027, eventually, sure. But right now, don't do it. It's just not worth the risk. Now, if you want to sit around and shoot the, whatever you want to call it with ChatGPT and talk about folate, talk about B12, it's pretty good about just answering simple questions. It's gotten better over the years. 5.2, I think, is the newest one out right now. Pro is pretty good. But outside of just asking questions and having a conversation about basic genetics, basic supplementation, you could say, if our report says, to increase sulfur-containing foods, you can talk to ChatGPT, ask, hey, what foods contain sulfur? How can I, create a diet plan around this? But you've got to ask it these direct questions and very, very directly. You can't just upload the report and say, hey, make a diet for me. AI is not there yet. Trust me, I'm trying. I've almost got it figured out on our end, and when we will, we'll tell everybody, but right now it's just not there. So please be careful.
Yeah, and the other thing to keep in mind too is if you upload your entire genetic test on there, your test is very secure. No one else can get the results, but once you put it on ChatGTP, now you've just put it out there and you've made your genetic results public. Just to keep that in mind too.
Yeah.
So people will come in, and this works on not just their genetic reports, but hormonal tests, what have you, right? Which I would, as far as the safety concern, like I'm more concerned about safety of my information with genetics than I am with a transient hormone panel, right? But people will come in with reports from hormones, genetics, all this stuff, and I had one lady, she didn't tell me, and so she wanted to see what I said versus what AI said, and so I give her the spiel, go over the results, and then she goes, "Well, that's kind of what the AI said." And then she pulls out her phone and she's like, "Look at here." And I'm like, "Give me that. Give me that." So I start looking at it and I'm like, just going through it. And I'm like, you know what? And like you said, the 30% error rate. It's always like, when you look at these things, it's like, yeah, but that's not quite right there, because it's not versed in how to manage those reports or any reports really. So like you're going to get some correct information, but there's always something that's not right in there.
Yeah.
All right. Do we have any questions? Okay, what is the gene associated with overeating? There's a couple. I think the main one is FTO. And then the other one is starts with an M. I always forget this one. I get it mixed up with the dairy gene. It's MCMR. There's two of them that can there's a couple of them that can cause overeating and increase the risk for obesity. And what it does is it basically can slow down that signaling from your gut to your brain that you're full. And so if you eat till you're full, you will overeat usually. And so what I always recommend when people have that variant, and that is outlined in the report at the top, it'll say whether you have an issue there. You want to really really be mindful when you eat, portion control your food, eat till about 80% full, slow down, making sure that you're getting enough protein and fiber, healthy fats, and then waiting about 20-30 minutes because you probably are full. But it's very easy to overeat when you have those genes and increase your risk for obesity.
Yeah.
My report states that I am at a regular risk of inflammation consistent with the general population. I have chronic inflammation, so it really doesn't coincide with what the report says. Okay. I mean, you can have inflammation without having variants in a gene based on if you're consuming an inflammatory diet, if you have chronic stress, if you're not sleeping. All of these things are going to increase inflammation. If you're eating a diet high in refined carbs and sugar, there are a few other genes that you can look at on the SNP summary, the IL genes like IL-6, IL-8. Those can also increase the risk for inflammation. But if you're low in omega-3 fatty acids, inflammation. There's so many other factors that can increase
TNF alpha.
inflammation. Yeah.
And
the one.
that's the other thing with inflammation is you may not, and you could have perfect let's say you have, you're eating a completely healthy diet, and I see this all the time. You eat a completely healthy diet, your genes don't look bad for inflammation, but something happens to your immune system, and your immune system is insulted by toxins, infections, stress. I mean, stress can literally kill you and change your immune system. So you can change, something can happen, an insult can happen to your immune system, and now your immune system is programmed. So, for instance, you take a person who has, and I've seen this before, someone who has a mast cell activation problem, and their histamine genes are perfect, absolutely perfect, but but something happened to them, and I know what happened to them, and it just sparked the immune system. So you can kind of change your environment, or your whatever happens to you can change what happens to your immune system. So it's not all genetic. There's other issues there. So I wouldn't blame the test. I would just say it's something else with the immune system's happening.
Yeah.
The other thing you want to look at is glutathione genes and SOD, because if the oxidative stress page, if you have oxidative stress, you're going to have inflammation. That's why, and this is another reason why that page comes up before methylation. If you're not methylating, you can be inflamed too, but you need to address oxidative stress. You have to address that first.
we see this a lot. People will write in like, "Oh, I this exact same thing. Like I have inflammation, but the box says I don't." This is why the report is in the order that it is. We're looking at the most common offenders first. This just means you got something else going on that's a little more advanced, and most likely we're going to cover it in one of the next sections. So, okay, yeah, you're inflamed. The inflammation markers that we're looking at aren't there. They're not chronically, or you don't have genetic predisposition to that. It's something else later in the report. Just trust the report, keep going through it. It could be histamine, it could be an oxidative stress thing, it could be, homocysteine and methylation, it could be something with the hormones, it could even be something as far as the neurotransmitters goes. Like norepinephrine is extremely anti-inflammatory. If we get norepinephrine, dopamine, epinephrine back up and functioning correctly, a lot of times that fixes some of the stuff. The other thing that we don't look at necessarily right now is hidden infections. And Don, do you want to touch on that? You're kind of the king infection guy.
Well, I don't know about that, but uh, no, it's just how our immune system actually gets. So we have a genetic programming, and when our we are genetically programmed, and it's all. I kind of think about it like this: we're all programs. We're analog programs. We're not digital programs. So we still live in an analog system in a digital world, but we are programmed genetically. But our immune system is programmable, and when all you have to do is get something that says, your immune system gets out of balance, something, and all one cell has to do is look at something and say, you know what? That looks foreign to me, and then it tells everybody else, and now your immune cells start changing about how they're differentiated and which direction they want to go, whether they fight bacteria, viruses, or what have you, and your immune system can get out of balance. So you get into a whole other thing besides genetics, but the genetics can typically uh, support whatever kind of therapies you're trying to do for people with those types of
Yeah.
problems.
And just to elaborate on what else I was saying, the GI tract page, if you're an FUT non-secretor and you're going to have dysbiosis in the gut, these little bugs and infections in the gut can trigger all kinds of immune reactions. So can the gluten and the food sensitivities that we look at. So just let's end on me what I said. Like, all this stuff is great that we said, and it's very complicated, but it still goes back to, okay, my chronic inflammation is not from this page from the inflammation. It's something else more advanced, something else more deeper, and just keep running through the report, and eventually, hopefully, you'll see your inflammation markers start to go down. Everything is connected. Everything is connected.
An interesting, there's a doctor who did a study with rheumatoid arthritis people. It was a small study, just and rheumatoid arthritis people, and they was looking at some of the inflammatory markers, and he wasn't even doing genetic testing. It was just he decided he knew that inflammation was present, but the only inflammation he wanted to address was gastrointestinal. And so he only did things to address gastrointestinal inflammation, which the patients did not have symptomatology there either. And after treating the gut inflammation, he noticed after several months that the autoimmune rheumatoid markers were actually declining from treating something that wasn't necessarily associated with that disease.
Yep.
So like you said, it's all connected.
It's
Yeah,
all connected.
all the
And
things
just
from the
and
gut.
just because people like to see this, like, oh my gosh, this is not correct. This does not fit I'm chronically inflamed, but my inflammation page says I shouldn't be. This is actually a good thing.
Mhm.
This is actually a good thing for you, because instead, like any other functional med doctor, you walk into their office, they're going to put you on curcumin. They're going to put you on all these anti-inflammatory herbs and things, and fish oil. That's probably not going to work for this individual who doesn't have these markers. You got to dig a little deeper. So this is actually a good thing that it's conflicting with your state that you're currently in. That means we get to dig deeper. So that might have actually saved you years of and tons of money buying a ton of curcumin. So there's another viewpoint on that. So I think we hammered that one home.
I tested a 10 from I tested a 10 from 0 to 15 on homocysteine in the blood. What is considered to be a high level of homocysteine in the blood? So I don't know about you guys, but functionally I learned that 5 to 7 is optimal. Anything over 7 is considered too high. Um, so what do you guys think?
I mean, but below 8. I mean, maybe 7.5. Don, what do you think? I mean, and you can go too low with it. If you're below
Yeah, you don't want to go too
5.0,
low.
it's
Right.
not
Yeah, you
right.
can
Don,
for
what?
sure. Um, Everything sits in this little U curve. Everything.
Yep.
Like too much is your U curve may be like this, but sometimes it's like this. And so it really depends on the source. I've seen where 10 is the maximum, but over the last several years, it's kind of dropped to that 7 mark. But yeah, I wouldn't want it below 5. But I think that, especially with homocysteine, again, we have to think about other pathways that are happening too. Because if you've got a homocysteine that's 11, and then you've got these other inflammatory markers, then it's probably going to be a little bit worse. It's not doesn't look that bad as far as the number, but when the overall picture lays out, it's like, well, it's not that great. But yeah, I'd say somewhere around 7 is good. But
Yeah.
depending on the person and everything that's going on, 10 may not be that bad.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
would,
and if you're concerned about it, usually to get those levels down, you would that would be your B vitamins, folate, B12, B6. Sometimes adding in trimethylglycine, TMG, can be helpful as well. So looking at your methylation pathways, your folate genes, your B12, your B6, and also your CBS, which can all affect your homocysteine levels.
Yeah,
and
typically, when in our training, we're taught when you see a high homocysteine, it's folate. But I've worked with people, and you give them folate, and nothing happens, and then sometimes you give them some B6 and magnesium, and it just drops. So
the
yeah, it's
CBS,
it's going to be
the
somewhere
CBS.
in that cycle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll add a few things onto that. Especially if we got any clinicians on the call, if the lab, especially if you're drawing these things in office, you have to spin that blood down immediately. If someone just takes that vial of blood, puts it in their coat pocket, and they forget to spin it down for a while, you're going to have an artificially increased homocysteine. You've got to spin that down immediately. The other kind of cool thing, too, to go a little deeper on it, is we have 3 elimination routes for homocysteine, essentially. We have the CBS pathway, the BHMT, and then the one we all know about is basically the folate pathway and B12 pathway to get rid of it. The brain only has the folate pathway. The brain doesn't have BHMT and it doesn't have CBS. So keep in mind clinically, if someone has a normal homocysteine in the blood, but they have a bad MTHFR, they may have elevated brain levels of homocysteine, and that's a dementia risk factor. So you may still want to kind of consider working on that pathway with that patient, especially if their folate levels are low, they've got MTHFR and some folate issues and some B12. I'm still kind of okay with treating it. Now, we don't want to push folate or homocysteine down below 5.5 because then we're going to get the glutathione issues, but keep that in mind that the brain may still have some folate, some homocysteine issues, even if the blood is okay. We have a very, very tight blood-brain barrier, and we can't just go do a spinal tap on everybody because they have MTHFR. But maybe one day we'll get a little better marker. But right now, I still am concerned about brain levels of homocysteine, even when the serum is normal.
So this is to me the list of all genes and what they govern, if you will. Do you have a comprehensive list that breaks them down? Madison asked. Okay, the list of all genes. So the list of all the genes are on the test with a summary at the end of the descriptive pages. All of the genes that are on the test, where it's pulled all the information from, is listed. Every gene SNP, along with a brief description of what they do.
We may put something together here soon about that. We just don't at the moment.
Next question. Is it possible to schedule a review call of our report with one of you guys?
Not
And
currently. Don,
not
Don,
currently.
Don takes some clients. If you want to look Don up, we have a physician finder on the website.
I was going to say I don't want to promote myself, but because of the physician finder, like
Yeah,
there's people maybe close to your area.
that's true. That's very humble, Don.
So we do offer, if there's any practitioners on listening, we do offer practitioner consults. That's what I do. But as far as consumers, that's a great resource on the website. Find a practitioner.
We may launch something relatively soon to help consumers a little more.
Oh, and keep in mind too, we have these. There's also other educational videos on our YouTube channel, and on the website under articles, that's the blog. So there's a lot of educational information on there as well, and signing up for our emails. They send out a lot of educational stuff on the emails too, and yeah, planning on expanding on that.
And Debbie and myself are pretty active on Facebook. We have a MaxGen Facebook page. If you have simple questions, you can ask there. We're pretty active in there.
Yeah, join the private Facebook page and you can ask anything and we'll answer it for you. Regarding FUT2, 20 years ago, a saliva test said I am a non-secretor, but my recent results from MaxGen shows me as a secretor. How do I know which is correct and how important is it? I don't know who you did your saliva test through. And this is, I keep forgetting to mention people's names who are asking the question. Sorry about that. But it is very important, and I've been using the test, used it for 8 years in my practice, and it's always been accurate on my end. So I trust our data. I'm not sure where yours was 20 years ago, but it is very important because this is the one gene that we cannot change the expression of. People are either born a secretor or they're born a non-secretor.
Yeah.
It's a recessive gene, meaning you would need both copies, one from mom and one from dad, homozygous, to be a non-secretor. So heterozygous is usually still a secretor. Of course, wild type is. But this gene basically produces this beneficial prebiotic sugar called fucose into the mucosal linings of the body, the gut, saliva, sweat, semen, tears, and breast milk. Non-secretors do not secrete this beneficial prebiotic sugar, so you're more at risk for dysbiosis or imbalance in the gut flora, and at a higher risk for IBS, IBD, celiac disease, UTIs, SIBO, candida overgrowth, and other gut infections. But it makes you immune to the norovirus because it's that binding site. It needs that fucose sugar for the norovirus and the rotavirus to latch on. Did you want to say something, Chad?
Yeah, unfortunately, lab error is a thing, and 20 years ago might not be as accurate as we have now. And we do conflict with other labs occasionally, and normally we're correct. Our quality control standards are through the roof. But you can, anytime you have issues like this that you're just kind of questioning something, just write an email, help@MaxGen Labs, and we'll take a peek at the raw data and just confirm it for you, no problem. Just to make sure. But the genetics on this FUT2 secretor thing is pretty rock solid. I know a saliva test might have missed it 20 years ago.
Yeah. Okay, next question. So Megax asks, alternatives to ChatGTP, are there any books or website resources you suggest to read on genes?
This is a relatively new field, so there's very limited information out there. Ben Lynch, I think, has fantastic information. And I will say I've read thousands and thousands of papers on these variants over the years. I've looked at everybody's reports. He's the one source outside of MaxGen that I think you could ut that's accurate. A lot of other people, I think, are interpreting research incorrectly. But Ben seems to be very, very good. I highly have a lot of respect for him. His book, Dirty Genes, is one that everyone seems to really like. Amy Yasko has some pretty good stuff too. But, check out our YouTubes, check out Ben's, and that's where I would stay. If you get outside of that, you're going to get into some, maybe not so accurate data.
I have to agree with that for sure.
Most of the stuff we're looking at is coming from PubMed or, some type of research-driven database. Yeah. So you know, Dr. Chad and I will pass back and forth papers, and you know, he does like to send me something and be like, "Oh my God, have you seen this?" Like, this is way bigger than we thought it was,
Yeah.
and usually it is. But again, it does come down to interpreting data, and that can be a lot harder for most people to do, looking at those types of references.
Yeah. And just because it's in a paper doesn't necessarily mean that it's correct. There's a lot of inconsistencies in the papers. There's weaknesses. I mean, I just had this conversation with one of my PhD buddies. He's, a brilliant man. He's like, dude, I can't hardly read research papers anymore because they're just flawed. And you really got to pay attention to these, because even the research papers, you got to look at how their machines were designed and set up, how the primer designs, how the studies were set up, the statistics. It's not easy to sit and just read a paper. I mean, you have to actually dig into it and see, like, okay, this is legit. And there's some papers that are more scrutinized heavier in the United States than, say, Europe. Yeah, yeah.
And you might find one paper that says something, and you can't find any more. But if you find a paper that is basically repeatable, and they're seeing the same kind of things
Correct.
with those genes over and over and over, but there's some little variances in what they're seeing, but their outcomes are still the same, like that might be some credible reports on those genes. So it's
Yeah.
yeah.
Reproducibility is king. All right, let's move on. We've got a ton of questions and not much time.
Yeah. APOE E3, E4 variant, do you have any additional info to help avoid dementia?
Blood sugar, number one. Get your blood sugar right. Number one. I had a lady come in, and she was a 4-4, and she had CRS. Y'all know what CRS is? Can't remember squat. Like, she was in her late 60s and already had like problems, and she came in with a report, and I was like, okay, so I was just telling her what the data meant. I wasn't trying to scare her. And I was like, but this does increase your risk for dementia. And she starts boohooing, I've got dementia. I'm like, no. She had already gone through the testing, and like, she doesn't have dementia. It came down to her mitochondrial function, how her cells are producing energy, her inflammatory state. And I think we changed her diet, supported mitochondrial function, and definitely got her on some omegas, and there might have been something else in there too. Within 3 months, her daughter was just floored that she was like, she's remembering stuff I'd forgotten about. I think I need to get this done. And I was like, well, okay, yeah, you probably should.
Yeah.
But it's so I think the statistic is, when you've got a 4, it's like a 20% increase risk. I can't remember the stat, but and when you've got a 4-4, it's, watch out. So
Yeah.
when you've got a 3-4, you still have to hit those ground level stuffs: blood sugar, adrenal function, inflammation, mitochondrial function, all that stuff. It's really just hitting the steps.
Yep. That it can be very scary to see a 4. I understand that some people opt to not even look at it, but knowledge is power. And when you see a 4 on that part of the report, or a 4-4, what that means is everything in the report up to that section just became 10 times more important to you.
Right.
Go back to page 1, start reading and implement everything up to that part. Because, I've had patients too. I had one lady that came in, she was 50-something years old, early onset dementia, been to Mayo Clinic, been to Vanderbilt, was sent home to make arrangements. Not good. And we did the stuff. We started working on her. I put her in a sauna. We started supporting her detox pathways, cleaned up her diet. We did an environmental toxin profile. She had a ton of toxins in her body. I think the toxins are what's really driving a big part of this with the sugar. So you got to get this stuff out. You got to live a cleaner life, because you're not going to be able to get this stuff out as good as other people. And sauna, diet, avoid toxins as much as possible. And this woman, it was so bad, she called my office daily asking, why am I seeing Dr. Yarbrough? Why am I coming here? And then after a couple weeks, the calls stopped to maybe once a week. And then after a couple months, she stopped calling. She knew what she was. She knew who we were. She eventually left a voicemail in our thing. Hey, thank you guys. I'm good now. And we never heard from her again. But so don't freak out when you see a 4. Like some of this stuff we can really, really improve just cleaning up the diet, cleaning up, the supplements, avoiding, things in our diet, in our environment that we shouldn't be around. And sauna. I love sauna. I have one in my basement, get in it.
Yeah, that's what's so great about the genetic testing is that when you know this information, you know how to support your unique DNA. So the goal is to prevent, reverse, or improve any disorder or disease.
Yep.
Because if we support our body with what it needs to function optimally, then, that's our best chance for optimal health into old age. And that's the key. So don't look at it like as it's scary, but look at it as like, now I know. So now I know what to do. It's your blueprint for optimal health.
Yeah. And this stuff works. Otherwise we wouldn't be here.
Right.
So, and all right, yeah, we probably need to move on.
Are there genes? Can you pop that back? Okay. And this is from Brittany. Are there genes consistent with autism, ADHD? I saw dopamine and neurotransmitters, but wasn't sure if there were others.
Chad.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we definitely see patterns with spectrum kids and ADD, ADHD. Once again, follow the report. Follow the report in order. The things that we tend to see, there's research with spectrum kids with glutathione and homocysteine. So that goes back to MTHFR, folate, and methylation. We see some associations with some of the CYP genes. If you've ever seen me speak, I've been preaching against Tylenol since 2018, maybe 2017. I know it's a big hot topic in the news and media now, but there are some people who are genetically predisposed to being very, very affected by Tylenol. And I think that's where the research and the studies that they're trying to throw up and say, oh, Tylenol's fine now, whatever. They're not looking at the individual person who has these genetics. If you have these genes that increase the breakdown of Tylenol into NAPQI, you're going to burn through glutathione like crazy. And when you burn through glutathione, that's low glutathione. There's been research on this that shows low glutathione, not just in the kid, but in the mother and father of the kid at conception. The risks go up almost 40-fold increased risk. And these are studies that were pretty well done. So those, I know that's such a hot topic now and everybody's all over it, but if you've got the genes for it, be very careful with Tylenol, especially around conception and things like that.
Yeah, and I'd like to add, along with methylation, don't forget about phosphatidylcholine, because
Absolutely.
choline is not only part of the methylation pathway, but it's the precursor to acetylcholine, which is the major neurotransmitter in the brain.
Huge.
So low levels of choline are linked to the incidence and severity of ADHD, autism, and Alzheimer's. So making sure that, so food sources of choline, the best source is egg yolks, but you can also supplement with choline. It's a phospholipid, so it breaks down fats in the liver. So it's also linked to non-alcoholic fatty liver disease and high cholesterol. The other thing that can help with people going back like to Alzheimer's, but also with ADHD and even autism, can be lithium orotate. So lithium orotate is just a mineral that in many areas it's just deficient in our soil and our water. And so supplementing with a little bit of lithium orotate can also help with mood and that neurotransmitter production, and even helping with B12 and folate, getting that like pushed into the brain. So it can really make a big difference for children. And then also with ADHD, well, anybody really, working on that gut health is extremely important because those, our neurotransmitters are created in the gut to be used by the brain. And so if we don't have a healthy gut, we don't have good bacteria in our gut to break down our food and to absorb it and get it into the cell, then we can have issues there too. Brittany says, my report says I have a high genetic risk for DAO deficiency, mild decreased HNMT activity, and slow MAO activity. What do you recommend as far as supplements and diet? Well, just like the test shows, if you have symptoms of histamine intolerance, you would want to do a trial of a low histamine diet to get that inflammation down. You can take, and then work on gut health. You can take a DAO enzyme. There's a few companies that sell that, taken 15 minutes before the meal. Unfortunately, because of the slow MAO, if that gene's expressing, and it's usually worse in males than it is in females, that breaks down not only neurotransmitters, but also breaks down tyramine. Foods high in tyramine are very similar to foods high in histamine. So anything fermented, aged cheeses, leftovers, it's almost the same list. Unfortunately, there's not an enzyme to break down tyramine, but I would recommend reducing those foods or eliminating them for a period of time and see if your symptoms improve. I've worked with many, many children with ADHD, and many of them had a slow MAO. And when we took out the foods high in tyramine, they were like a different child within a week or two. They could focus. They weren't having anger outbursts. So it really, because it can cause a lot of ADHD symptoms too. So again, it's just because you have the variant doesn't mean it's expressing. So if you have the symptoms, the best thing to do would be to, remove those foods or greatly reduce them. Usually with histamine, it's like a bucket. You might be able to tolerate some, and everybody's tolerance could be different. But if you eat too much in a day, you overflow your bucket, and then you're having symptoms. But the tyramine, that one's a little bit trickier. And do you have anything to add, Don?
I was gonna say I couldn't have put that any better, and yeah, I deal with those a lot, and but I do see that like some people have. It just depends on the person. Like you can have uh, someone who's got a histamine intolerance, and like you have to do those enzymes. Other people, they can just lower the load, and then they're fine. They can eat, and then they experience symptoms, and it's like, okay, I got to get off the foods. So it's more like a slow type of breakdown versus like a complete deficiency
Right.
or inactivity. Then that and I definitely like the people that have the bucket scenario. That's just a lot easier to deal with. But you don't know. Sometimes you got to play with that and see. You don't know how big your bucket is, and you kind of got to play with it. Like if you go off of it for 3 weeks, the histamine foods, and let it lower. If you want to add some of those things back, go slow and add like one histamine food back, and see how you do, and then add a little bit higher histamine food and see how you do, and you just got to play with it.
Madison asks, since the body is always changing and gene expression can be affected by the foundation of health, sleep, diet, etc., what is a great follow-up test to see how things are improving or not improving? Don,
There's
I'll have
a
you answer
that's
this
a
one.
there's a lot to consider there. I mean,
was
you
thinking
should
of-
go ahead.
Don,
I was thinking organic acid, but what do you guys think?
Don, you handle that one.
Well, that's what I say. There's a lot of options there. One, it depends on what your standard lab tests show, whether you've got what your CBC, your white blood cells, hematocrit, hemoglobin, platelets, all that stuff. Depends on what that looks like. Your liver enzymes. You could probably do it very simply. CRP. I don't know why that doesn't get run more. Your homocysteine, those are like pretty simple labs, very inexpensive. even for cash price. Maybe your doctor will do it and you can put it on insurance. Um, but we do them cash and they're super cheap. And but organic acids is a great test. Um, and yeah, there's a lot of. I mean, if you've got a toxin overload, like a detoxification problem, then you may want to get a toxin burden test, and you could monitor those. But that's the thing. The follow up testing. If you're going to do some of those uh, types of tests, you probably need to do them about every 3 months or so to make sure that things are going the way they're supposed to be going.
It's very dependent on the variance that you've got and the situation you're in.
Right.
I don't think there's a blanket statement we could say, you know, watch these markers for everybody. It would be very, very, very specific to that individual based on the variance they've got, their history, current presenting symptomatology, and the environmental factors that they're currently in. I don't think it's a really complicated answer to that question.
Yeah, I mean, even the wearable health stuff, the
Yeah.
straps
Yeah,
and the rings and all that
that's good.
jazz.
Good
Those
idea.
those are good to have to monitor things.
The HRV on those, I think, is one of the best markers for health. HRV is incredible.
Yeah.
I monitor mine.
I monitor mine, my Aura ring.
Yep.
Okay, Jeremy asks, what do I look at for heart health on my report, and how do I interpret the data?
So we don't necessarily look at pathogenic type stuff where, you're going to get heart disease. There are genes that are associated with heart disease scattered throughout the panel, throughout the recommendations. The two big ones we look at is factor V and prothrombin. If you have those, you need to discuss that with your physician. Those are pretty gnarly ones. Nattokinase and lumbokinase are great for those. I think there's almost all men probably need to be on that. I don't know what Don thinks about it, but to answer that question, we don't necessarily try to give you a cardiac risk, profile. The FDA would come shut us down if we did that. We legally can't do that. So there are recommendations throughout the report that will help lower the risk for any complications from anything that's there. It's built in. So I hope that, Don, you got anything else to tag on?
Well, yeah, like you said, it's bits and pieces because cardiovascular disease is not just one problem, and that's one thing that you know in allopathic medicine, it's treated as a single problem, but it's a group of problems. It is a blood sugar problem. It
Nailed it.
is a inflammatory problem. It is an immune activation problem. It is an antioxidant problem. There's just so many things that actually really precipitate cardiovascular disease, and there those types of things. Just you kind of got to surround the dragon on that one, and there are some people who are just there's other genetics that exist that like family history of some people just get blocked arteries. I mean, it does happen. Now, can you reduce their risk by changing the lifestyle, changing all this stuff? Yes, but some people are just programmed for it, and we don't really have all the answers for those types of people. But we're just trying to reduce risk.
Um,
You're back.
Diane asks, what is the best source of vitamin C?
Food source, strawberries and kiwis are your best food source, not oranges. Oranges are fine, but your kiwis and your strawberries are actually higher sources of vitamin C and bioflavonoids. And that's the other thing when you're talking about food sources, when you get vitamin C, you're getting bioflavonoids, and the bioflavonoids compound with the vitamin C to get a better anti-inflammatory type of effect. to actually, and bioflavonoids really do help strengthen the cardiovascular system, by the way. And but as far as supplementation, you'll find that most people are just using ascorbic acid, and that's pretty much the standard in the market. Ascorbic acid is ascorbic acid is ascorbic acid. So you might find some whole food sources, but as far as like supplements, but really strawberries, kiwis, make sure they're organic because it's on the Dirty Dozen. But if you got a histamine problem, can't do those two.
Yep.
Yeah, so maybe picking something like a natural source, like from like amylase, like
AMLA.
yeah, amla fruit, like
Amla, yeah.
amla fruit. That's a great source for vitamin C. Okay, Allison asks, on the SNP report pages, there's a column titled minor showing a letter and a percentage. What does this column tell us? So that letter is the allele, and it's basically a change in the amino acid. So the alleles is like the change in the amino acid sequence of a gene that can cause, the SNP. So the minor allele would be, how I said how the wild type is the most common form in nature or in population. The minor allele would be the second most common allele. So basically that's the more risk allele, or less common, the less common allele. And the percentage is the percentage of the population that has that allele. Did I say that right? That makes sense?
Yeah, that kind of goes back to that homozygous wild type variants type thing.
Right. So that's not your percentage, because a lot of people think that. That's the percentage of the population that has that minor allele. So the smaller that percentage is, actually, the more rare it is, and sometimes the more problematic it is. Just like Chad mentioned, factor V and prothrombin. If you look at the percentages of those, are very small. I believe factor V is like 1% of the population. That's why that one is very significant if you have variants in that one.
Yeah. So how many people are like you?
So Terry asks, our family did the MaxGen, the works, and just waiting for the results. Once we do get the results, what's next? Where do you suggest we go to understand and supplement for the results? Well, it's going to be all outlined on the test. It's literally, if you just go through the test, it's going to show you symptoms, diet, lifestyle recommendations, and supplement recommendations. But again, like I mentioned earlier, you can go on the website under articles. There's one, how to read your MaxGen report. That's a great place to start. The webinars on YouTube, and join the MaxGen Facebook page.
Mm-hmm. Start with the green sections. Mm-hmm. Just everybody in the family read the green sections, talk about it, try to implement what you can, and then wait a week, 2 weeks before you get to the blue sections. That's, a lot of these reports, some of them are 100 pages long. There's data thrown everywhere. It's extremely hard to navigate. We've really tried to make this as easy as possible. You don't want to go do everything all at once, because you're not going to know what worked. And the reports, like we've said, are designed what's going to have the biggest bang for their buck and affect stuff down the line. Start with the green sections. There's plenty of data in there that's going to be there to tell you certain things to do. Some of them may sound kind of generic, but really focus on those things that are generic. And if something's kind of feels a little off, that's fine. You don't. That's the thing with testing. You never know what you're going to find. If you expected everything that's on the test, why do it? So focus on the green first. Don't get overwhelmed. It's a lot of data. Just focus on the green ones.
All right, you guys, that is all the time that we have today. Thank you, Dr. Yarbrough, Dr. Thompson, and Debbie for taking the time to be here and answering everybody's questions. This session was recorded and it'll be uploaded to our YouTube probably tomorrow. If you have further questions or want more resources, We will be sending out an email that includes the link to the private Facebook page, this recording. Follow us on social media, and then feel free to reach out to our help desk if you have any additional questions. But thank you so much for being here and tuning in, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Bye, everybody.